Let's get started. Well, welcome everyone. We're so glad that you can join us today. My name is Charlene Margot, and I'm co-founder of nonprofit The Parent Venture that brings you this program, the Parent Education Series, now in its 19th year. We're delighted to have with us again our favorite Parent Forum presenter, Dr. Eran Magen. I'll be telling you a little bit more about Eran in a couple of minutes. But today's topic is how to be your child's favorite conversation partner. And boy, we know from the registrations that this is a topic that is really important to people. And we hope to give you some good tips and strategies today to make that happen.
Thank you, Charlene. Hello, everybody. I hope you are recovering either from the sugar rush or from your kids' sugar rush. I will, as Charlene said, talk for, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes or so, and then we'll open it up to a discussion. While I'm presenting things, I'm not going to be seeing the chat. So on the one hand, it means I won't see what you're writing in real time, but on the other hand, it means that you can write whatever you want, and then we'll get to it once I'm done with the presenting. So if there's a question or something that pops up as you see it, by all means, put it in. Let me pull up the slides. Here we are. Looks okay?
Yes, perfect.
Perfect. That's better than usual. So let's start by saying good on you for making time to come. I think it's really great. Parenting is something that happens to all of us during life, and often is, while being the most important, it's often the thing that we spend the least intentional time planning on and thinking about. And it's tough because it means we have to improvise a lot. And so it's great that you're coming here, that you're making time to think about parenting and think about different approaches. But more than that, just keep in mind that you're doing a good job already, right? And by and large, this is something I find myself saying and thinking a lot more recently. They're probably going to be fine. We can make them a little bit different around the edges. We can change trajectories somewhat, but like they're basically going to be okay. Look at like people around you. They grew up, and again, just by the very fact that you're attending things like this event means like you're attentive, caring, sensitive parents in all likelihood, right? So you are doing well, and they will probably do well. And we're figuring out how to do this in a way that's more comfortable for everybody, and will facilitate a better relationship for everybody. Okay. Just as to set the scene, when I think about interactions between people in general, but definitely parents and kids, I think about how much emotional intensity is involved. There can be fairly little intensity. Nobody's having big emotions, and that's when we do relationship building. There can be times when there are big emotions, and that's when we support the other person. So we change the role, and the look and the feel of the interaction really changes. And then there are times when people have very big emotions and they're essentially in crisis. They can't keep themselves safe, or they're about to make some enormously huge, irrecoverable mistake. That's when we do crisis intervention. Today, we're on the lighter side of things. We're basically living normal life, and we're trying to figure out how do we connect better with our kids? How do we have more meaningful conversations and encourage them to share more with us? So that's by way of orientation. Here are the main points that I'm going to cover today. One, and most importantly by far, none of what we're going to be talking about today, none of what I'm going to be talking about today is a trick to get the kids to talk. This is not what it's about. This is about actually wanting to get to know your kids and conveying it in a way that is inviting for them, right? But it's not like tricking them to share stuff that they wouldn't have shared. It's about being curious, and it's about being humble in terms of not assuming that we know more or we know better, and inviting them to talk. This is a little bit like we have a different session about how to support our kids when they're upset. And one of the questions that comes up regularly, I would say, is wouldn't they know that I'm just like using these techniques, that it's a trick? And I say, well, it's not a trick. These are things that help. It's kind of like when you're learning to do a massage for somebody who has maybe sore muscles. Nobody's going to be upset that you're applying a technique. If you're saying, can I practice my massage skills that I learned about you? Everybody would say, great, yes, please do, right? But none of this is a secret. None of this is a trick. It's just things that help communicate your curiosity and your warmth. toward your kids. So the main thing that determines how much we share with other people is how much we trust them to do well with this information that we give them, and how much we trust that good things will happen and bad things will not happen when we share this information with them, right? Both as adults talking to adults, but certainly as kids talking to adults, they make the same calculation. And in a word, I would say it's about how much goodwill is in the relationship. How much goodwill does the kid feel toward the parent, and how much goodwill does the kid think the parent feels toward the kid? And I think about it really, it's an analogy, but I think about it like a bank account. And the amount of goodwill is like the amount of credit or the balance in the account. It can go up and it can go down depending on what we do. And the most important thing that we can do is, in general, in our relationships with the kids, make sure to cultivate as much goodwill as possible between us. And the way to do it, day in, day out, is to show our kids that we care about them and that we respect them. These are the two sort of final currencies of relationships: care and respect. I'll give you some concrete examples in a minute. And we want to minimize the amount of times that we reduce the amount of goodwill in the relationship. And the way to reduce the amount of goodwill in the relationship is to either show our kids that we don't care about them, that their enjoyment or goodwill is not our top priority, or to show our kids that we don't respect them and we don't respect boundaries or preferences that they expressed. Another way that we can withdraw goodwill from the relationship is by asking our kids to inconvenience themselves for us. And that's something that's a part of any relationship. It's okay to ask people to inconvenience themselves, right? Pass the salt, go get their groceries, clean the room. Can you help me move this big thing? Could you scratch my, back? I can't reach it. Like these are parts of relationships, and it's okay. But we just have to keep in mind that whenever we ask somebody else to do something for us that they wouldn't normally do, there's a little withdrawal happening from that relational account. And if we do that endlessly, eventually they'll say no or get irritated with us. And so we just want to be mindful of putting in more than we're taking out of the account, exactly like with a bank account, ideally. And as the amount of goodwill in the relationship increases, more and more good things happen, right? Trust comes with goodwill. Like I mentioned, people tend to be more honest when there's more goodwill, more vulnerable. They'll put in more effort towards supporting you and helping you and cooperating with you and forgiving each other when we make mistakes. Lots of good things, and I would say only good things happen as goodwill increases in the relationship. This is kind of a dipstick test that you can do to check where you are with your kid or where your kid is with you, right? How much goodwill is there? So high goodwill, I would say like fantasy levels, high goodwill is when your kid spontaneously goes out of his or her way to be helpful to you, right? Breakfast in bed, come home to a sparkling house, all the leaves are raked, shredded, and bagged before you ever, like fantasy, right? So this is like top possible bar. I have yet to encounter this situation. I would love to hear it if you do and learn from you about this. Good, reasonable, medium levels amount of goodwill is when you ask something of your kid and vast majority of the time your kid says sure and does it, right? How much credit do you have with your kid? How easily does your child extend credit to you? You say, oh, could you do this? Please do that. Could you stop doing this? How about that? And they cooperate. In the context of today, it's also about answering questions that you ask, right? What level of detail they give you, what level of vulnerability is there. You can think about these things as you're assessing how much goodwill is between you and your kid in the relationship. And then if you're starting to get on the low side, which would happen if, for example, you're asking your kid to do a lot of stuff, but not replenishing as much, or if you're harsh more often than not with your kid and only sometimes kind of showing care and respect in ways that your kid understands to be care and respect, right? So you end up with a lower amount of goodwill in the relationship. So in those situations, maybe you ask your kid to do something and your kid thinks about it or requires multiple reminders, right? Or sometimes does it, sometimes not. This is a sign that the relationship is not as strong as it could be. Really a dipstick test, basically, right? So if you can even think on your own about times that you've recently asked your kid to do something or asked your kid a question, and just think, like, how easily did this come? Was it pulling teeth or was it pouring water? If there's not a lot of goodwill in the relationship and you use your power as a grown-up to basically force your kid to do things that your kid doesn't want to do, you can do it, of course, and you'll be successful much of the time because you actually have a huge amount of power relative to your kid. But then you end up running the risk of entering an overdraft in the relational account, right? A negative goodwill balance. And this is the opposite of the fantasy high balance. So this is when your kid will actively go out of his or her way to make your life miserable. And that's not somewhere we want to be, right? But that's like active conflict. And if this is happening, or if it feels like it's happening, then this is a sign that the balance of deposits into the relationship and withdrawals from the relationship is disrupted, right? And this is worth putting real thought into it. Today, I'm not going to talk a lot more about this particular topic. This is almost like a fundamental that needs to be there in order for good conversations to happen, right? We have a separate session about this called Foundations of Goodwill. There's a recording of this on the Parent Venture channel. We'll do another one of those in the next few months. And so we'll go into a lot more in depth there. But this is, again, part of the background to be thinking about. These are the kinds of ways that you could be showing care or respect just on a daily basis. It's normal stuff. There's not a lot to learn here, right? It's just stuff to be mindful of, to think, oh, have I used every opportunity that I have to say thank you to my child, to praise my child for something that my child did well, to show personal interest in things that my child is pursuing. Am I shouting a lot from a distance? What's my face like when we talk? Things like that. So all this just as a little bit of a reminder, things you've, I'm sure, heard before and probably know already. However, with respect to our particular topic today, these are the things that I'm going to cover. Ways to encourage your kids to talk more with you. One, asking open-ended questions about things that your child cares about. That's a major thing, right? They'll talk about stuff they care about, not necessarily about stuff you care about. Another is to listen well once your kid gets going. I'll go more in depth into each of those in a couple of minutes. So once your kid gets going, once your kid like sort of took the wheel and is pressing the gas, you stay well away from the driver's seat and you let them lead, because they'll talk about what they want to talk about. And as soon as we start interrupting, they shut down. The other is along the same lines, considering yourself to be like in a consulting position, meaning when you're asked for advice and opinions, you provide them, but even then, it's more about getting more out of your child in terms of what his or her preferences are, how he or she are thinking about it, and so on, rather than kind of telling them what to do without being invited. And then in general, maintaining an orientation of wanting to learn about your kid, wanting to be curious. You're not monitoring or supervising. Sometimes we are, of course, right? But when we're not, to maintain this attitude of like, this is a cool person that I want to learn about. This is a fun or interesting or lovable or cute or adorable person that I want to learn more about because I don't know everything about this person, rather than thinking about like an interrogation or like a coaching session or whatever it is. Just wanting to learn. And lastly, and very importantly, not to nag, because sometimes our kids won't share with us, and being able to respect that boundary will be a relational deposit, and ignoring that and nagging them is a big relational withdrawal, which makes them even less likely to share. So we'll end with not nagging. So I'll go into a little bit more detail about each of those, and then we'll be done. How much do you know about the things that your child cares about? Probably a good deal, right? But it's worth pausing and thinking about this for a bit. What are the names of your kids' good friends? How does your kid like to feel? Right? In what ways can you compliment your kids that matter, right? When you say, oh, you're so smart, oh, you're so good looking, or oh, you're so strong, or oh, you're so tenacious, or like, what are the things that connect that actually make your kid feel good? And what are the things that make your kid feel not good or insecure or upset? What does your kid really like to do? Has been really liking to do or learn about, or whatever it is, right? The more you know about your kid, the more points of connection there are. What does your kid really enjoy? What is he worried about? Is there a particular friend who's been a problem, or a classmate who's been a problem? Um, Something that is coming up that your kid is not sure if she's prepared for. Family members that your kid has some sort of, strife or stress over. What is your kid really looking forward to? Things like that, right? These are like the basics. It's a fun list to do even with your friends, right? To say, oh, my friend Sarah. Okay, who are her friends? What does Sarah like to feel? What is she really into? Right? Just priming yourself to have conversations with this person. And when asking about any of those things that your kid cares about, as much as possible, making it easy to answer. Meaning, if I were to ask you now, what is the best experience you've ever had in your life? Right? When somebody asks me a question like this, I just get this big deer in the headlight feel. I'm like, the best, like it's too much, and then I stop, right? But if somebody says, like, what's a fun thing that happened last week? I'm like, oh, there are these three things. I can choose from them, right? So making it easy. So avoiding kind of best and worst and least and things like that, and asking questions that focus on what is a thing that happened, or what happened today, or whatever it is. How does it, how do you do these things when you do them? What is it like? What did you feel like when this thing happened? And so on. Um, I would recommend against simple yes no questions, just because you'll get a yes no answer and it just kind of shuts down the conversation, right? They'll start talking when you open it up. In terms of, say, oh, what did you do anything interesting today in school? Not really. Oh, great. Okay. I mean, the conversation just died, right? But you can say, what did you do at school today? And the kid might still say, not much. I don't know. Say, did anything fun happen? They're like, not really. Well, what was like a fun thing that happened? I don't know, I guess. We had a cool science experiment. Oh, what did you do? Right. And that's where it starts. So the yes no questions will quickly lead us to a dead end. Reframing questions in ways that connect with things that your kid cares about will help open up the conversation. How was school is the question probably most asked by parents and probably most shut down by kids worldwide. I don't have exact statistics about it, but that would be my guess. And so how can we rephrase it in a way that would connect more with your kid? Well, if you know that there's a particular class happening that your kid maybe likes, maybe you ask about this. So my son is 7. As far as I can tell, his view of school is that he goes to school to play soccer, and there are some classes that happen before and after that, right? And I've learned to ask him about soccer, because that's what starts the conversation. It's like, how was soccer? Sometimes I'll just ask, how was school? And he's like, oh, we tied 2-2. And it's already understood what school is about today. But ask about the thing that your kid cares about or has been thinking about, and you'll get something coming out. And once the conversation is going, it's so much easier to keep it going and direct it to other directions. Did you see this friend today? Yes or no, as opposed to, oh, this thing that you were thinking about happened. How did that go? Right? We were talking the other day about how Julian and you argue when you play volleyball together, and oh, it's Wednesday. Oh, Wednesday is when you do the volleyball practice, right? Okay, how did it go, Julian, at volleyball? Very hard to give a no question, an answer like no to that. Of course, your kid might say, it's fine. This happens, but you're increasing your chances of getting meaningful answers when you do this. So one is about asking questions, asking open-ended questions about things your kid cares about. Then once your kid gets going, you stay out of the way, meaning as much as possible, you paraphrase. I call this WIG. WIG is an acronym for what I got. So your kid says blah, 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 and then you say what you understood from there without interpreting, without adding advice or anything. You just say back, how did it go with Julian today how did it go with Julian today at volleyball? And your kid says, it was okay, we didn't really argue today. So I might say, oh, so it was better than last time? Your kid, I guess so. Yeah, I mean, we still argued a little bit when I thought that something was out. And he was great. He's talking more now, right? And I do this just by saying back what he said or what I understood, right? Without adding too much content, without guiding the conversation. So as long as the kid is talking, literally paraphrasing, saying back what your kid said in your own words will get you very, very far because your kids are interested in what they have to say. And so if you're showing that you're paying attention to what they're saying, they'll tell you more stuff that they want to say because it's clear that you're not going to hijack the conversation. It's a very simple principle. It's the oldest trick in the psychotherapy book. I shouldn't say trick, it's a technique, but it's valuable because people want to talk about stuff that they feel some energy or intensity about. And if you give them the space to do it, they will, to the betterment of both the relationship and the intensity that they feel around the thing because they get to process it. Okay, consulting is about asking your kid for opinions and advice. This could be about stuff that your kid is sharing, or it could be even about stuff that you're going through, because by doing this, you are modeling to your child the kind of communication that you would also enjoy having your kid apply toward you. So if you're driving back from wherever together and you say, hey, Jack, this funny thing happened at work today, and I'd love your thoughts about what I can do to make it better. What do you think? And Jack goes, what? Sure, yeah. What's going on? Right? And then you say, oh, this thing happened. And you give some age appropriate thing that actually happened, and then listen to your child. Your child may be dead wrong or maybe surprisingly insightful. It sort of doesn't matter, right? But you're modeling sharing. How much do you share with your kid about what happened in your day? Many adults just don't. It's supposed to be completely one directional, right? But really what we're doing is modeling to kids that we don't share information. And so if you model sharing information and then asking for their advice, their ideas, their interpretations, their opinions, you're doing a lot of things at once here, all of them positive, right? You're modeling sharing, you're modeling inviting the other person to participate, you're showing them that you care about their opinions, which is a big deposit, relationally speaking, big relational deposit. If you come back to them a couple days later and say, hey, I talked to Cheryl, like you said, that like maybe we should just like sit down and talk about this thing. And we did talk, and you know what? It worked great. That's an amazing deposit, right? Into the relationship. You're showing such respect for your kid, and your kid feels so good about it. And now your kid feels closer to you and has learned that sharing is helpful. And a lot of good modeling is happening here. Okay, this is just to remind me to say that consulting is a good way of showing respect. The mindset, as I mentioned before, is just learning, getting to know your kid. Your kid is always a little bit of a stranger at the beginning because they're changing so much. And this new person is not somebody that we know totally well. Like something new is lurking behind the facade of someone we know. And later on, when they're big, just because we don't get to spend as much time with them as we'd like, probably. But there's always more to know about this person. And we want to know this person. And so I think it's very flattering. It's very fun when it feels like somebody wants to know about us. It often doesn't feel good when it feels like somebody's trying to supervise us or monitor us. And it's such a subtle difference. And the difference is just in the mindset of the person talking to us. And so if we can be a parent who just enjoys their kid and wants to know them, not, anxiously clingy, not angrily supervisory, just like you're a fun person and I'd love to hear what's going on with you. Like I enjoy hearing about your day. Great. I think it makes the tenor of the conversation so much more pleasant and so much more enjoyable for everybody. And so just being able to catch yourself when you're starting to become like a little too micromanagey, a little too interrogatey, and switch over to just saying to yourself in your mind, like, I just want to get to know this person better or hear about the day. But this is not a test of, how good a parent am I? It's not even a test of how good the relationship is. Despite what I was saying before, that it's more likely that they'll share when the relationship is better. Still, I don't think there's any need to turn this into kind of a competition with yourself or sort of a high stakes test. Sometimes we want to tell people about ourselves and how our day was, and sometimes we don't, right? Today, I'm guessing that for many of you, you were asked many times, how are you? And probably for some large percentage of those times, you kind of blew them off one way or another. by telling them a short answer that did not lead to a deep conversation. Now, granted, most of these people are probably not people that you're very close with, but even people that we're close with, we don't always want to share everything all the time. And unfortunately, the time that we connect most with kids, Arlene and Bev say this all the time, and now I'm remembering to say this myself. One of the first times we connect with kids when they have stuff to tell us is after school, which is the time when they are at their most tired and drained. And they may need some time to recharge. They may not want to talk immediately about what happened. Sometimes they might, and sometimes they don't, and that's okay. And the more we can avoid nagging them, pushing them to talk more, anything like that, the better. Because when we nag and push, that doesn't make them want to talk more, right? It makes them shut down. It starts grating on them. It's depleting the goodwill in the relationship. They don't want to talk. They don't want to talk. It's okay. Maybe they'll want to talk about it later. Maybe not. Maybe they'll want to talk about something completely different. Maybe you'll say, how was school? And they're like, eh. You're like, what do you mean? They're like, it just wasn't great. Like, oh, something happened. They're like, no, it's fine. Just not great. And then you give them some time, and then they come back and they say, my skateboard broke the other day. I'm like, great, let's talk about that, right? Whatever they want to talk about is good. It's fine. Of course, there's some things that you may want to know about in particular, but avoid pushing if you can. Because when we push too much, they shut down. It's just not worth it. And again, just avoid getting in this mindset of like, this is a test of how much my kid is willing to open up to me. There's so many factors influencing whether or not our kid wants to talk at a given time. The whole goal of these different things that I've been telling you here is to increase the probability that on a given day your kid will want to talk, or in a given time. But sometimes they just won't, and it's okay. Learning to not push actually creates so much benefit in terms of their willingness to talk and to approach and to be near you, because they don't need to worry about you pushing them so hard when they are. So these are all the tips. I said them already, so I'm not gonna repeat them in great depth. I would just, once for good measure, if the relationship is already pretty good, then by asking them about things that they care about in an open-ended way, listening really well once they start talking, just relinquishing the wheel completely and letting them talk, not jumping in with advice and ideas and opinions, but rather asking them about different things. If you have an advice that you feel like you have to give, or opinions that you feel like you have to share, ask for permission, unless this feels somehow critical, right? You can literally say, oh, I have an idea. Do you want to hear? And maybe they'll say yes, and maybe they'll say no, but respecting that. And being in the mindset of wanting to learn more about this person, not supervising, not interrogating, wanting to learn and get to know this miraculous person that's in front of us and growing and changing. And if they don't want to talk on a given day, that's okay. Or if they don't want to talk at a given hour, that's okay. There'll be so many more opportunities, and they will all be more fruitful if we don't push now, right? And I guess I'll take a small step back to the consulting part, modeling. Maybe I'll add that as a separate point, but just modeling sharing. Sharing between adults that the kid can see, sharing between you and the kid that the kid can see, because more than anything, they'll behave toward you in the way that you behave toward them. Okie doke, that's the list. One little plug at the end. Parentingforhumans.com is a website that I created that has materials around this kind of stuff. It has some workshop recordings. I send a newsletter out every once in a while. The URL is here for those who want to join. I guess we'll put it in the chat in case people want to click it there. The other website is newer. It's an initiative that I started in the past year or so. If you or anyone you know is a divorcing dad, then divorcingdads.org is a resource to support divorcing dads to stay connected with their kids, to remain involved and connected and present. A lot of divorcing dads end up kind of fading for a lot of different reasons, not all of them because they want to, and to the detriment of the kids often, right? It's nicer to have contact with all of your parents. And so this website is dedicated to supporting dads and doing this, not about taking sides, moms versus dads. It's just about saying it's a good idea for kids to have access to both their parents I'm in a particular position to support dads as opposed to moms. And so that's why I did this. But I think everybody deserves the support and everybody deserves having as many parents as possible. So if you or anyone else could be helped by that, by all means, spread the news. Through the parentingforhumans.com website, joining the mailing list, you'll get blog posts. When I write stuff, you'll hear about other workshops that are happening around topics like this, and then a parenting group where people can meet every couple of weeks and just think about parenting sort of in the way that I've been doing here, except it's not me talking, it's you in pairs and in triads, talking about how things are going and thinking about what we want to change and how we want to go about it.